Happy Memorial Day. I hope the service that you're at, you are able to properly salute all of our fallen soldiers and patriotic men and women who served our country, uh, even if it was on the citizen side, supporting all the great soldiers out there who are commemorated on this day in 2023. I wanted to share a Memorial Day story with you, and it has to do with Frances Smith, who married Jack Donaldson. They were my grandparents. They were very unique. My grandma was sitting with me in 1984. Uh, we were watching uh, soap operas, I believe, and she began to tell me a story about a letter that she received with my grandpa in Crab Orchard, Tennessee. And she didn't really share too much information about it. It was a letter to my grandpa, and so she just basically told me about uh, the life of my grandfather and how they were sitting there with my mother, who was just born uh, roughly a year prior to the letter being received. And I have a reading of the letter that's attached. But one of the most interesting things to me was the way that she described the war. And she said that my grandfather was ill, uh, very ill with his stomach. And when my mother was born, he ended up going into the hospital and being admitted at the same time as her. So all three were actually admitted into that Rockwood hospital at the same time as my mother was born. When they got out, uh, it took a lot out of him, and it took a while for him to recover. And I know that he really enjoyed his letter from his friend, Private Roy E. Smith, 337 Casual Company, 85th Infantry Division. And when they received the letter on May the 2nd, I believe it's very hard to read the date. I found out almost 40 years later uh, that Roy had passed away 10 days later on Mother's Day as part of the casualties of World War II. And I know across the country we lost a great number of soldiers, and because of age, we seem to be losing them all. And I think it's important not to move on from the World War II veterans here in 2023, and we want to recognize the great ones who served in that war, which was a war that will never be forgotten because of the atrocities committed, not only from the Germans, uh, but from the atomic bombs that came into use after Pearl Harbor. And these are the scars of war on both sides. Uh, War is a terrible thing, but it's a mechanism used to invoke peace and resolution to what you can only describe as tyranny and the rise of a hate group called the SS, who stormtrooped the parliament in Germany in Berlin and took over the government and began a campaign against all others. It's oftentimes not talked about that they actually were taking into custody handicaps, homosexuals, Jews, and anyone who didn't fit their Aryan prototype because they wanted to create a supreme race, and that's in their own words. And thank God for Roy E. Smith and his family down in Crab Orchard who contacted me and gave me the picture of his headstone and a picture of him. On this Memorial Day, we salute you, Crab Orchard.